Hey there, it is Dr. Karen here with Price Physical Therapy and the Stroke Movers Group, and I want to talk to you today about 3 exercises that are really good for getting better hip control, okay? So the reason why the hip is harder to control is because, excuse me, when the hip extends, when the hip goes out straight, the knee wants to go out straight as well, okay? So we're just going to talk about the problem, because when people get up and start walking, if the hip and the knee are still connected in that extensor pattern, it's a synergy, when you're stepping, it's very hard to control the hip, okay? So I know everyone's at a different level. Some of you are quite advanced and you're just having some problems. Some of you are just getting started. So I wanted to go over just 3 separate kinds of exercises that just show you very clearly how the hip and the knee have to move out of that pattern, all right? So we want to keep the knee from extending out when the hip is extending, okay? And extending means that the hip is going behind you, okay? That's extension, and this is flexion, all right? So we're going to work on extending at the hip, but not allowing or not wanting to allow the knee to go into extension as well, all right? So let's see if these 3 exercises are helpful for anyone today, okay? All right, so I would do this on a bed. This is a very narrow bench, so I can't do it exactly the way I would do it if I had a mat table here. But I think you can see what I have on the floor here is I have a little step, all right? So that step is just going to be there on the floor next to this bench that I'm sitting on. And I would probably go ahead and lie down on my back with this, but I'm just going to be kind of back on my arms a little bit. What I want you to see here is the hip, okay? So right now my hip is in flexion, it's bent up, and my knee is in flexion, okay? So I want to be able to start extending at the hip, but I don't want my knee to go into extension, okay? So one really good exercise, and again, I know you have an arm that doesn't maybe work so well. I'm just showing you, so don't pay attention to up here so much. Just look here at the hip, all right? I'd probably be laying down on my back. That's what I usually do with my clients. Have them lay on their back with their head on a pillow, but high enough so they can actually see their knee. It's very important. So you would look at your knee, all right? And then you would lift that leg straight up so that the knee is still pointing at the ceiling, all right? Then you take the knee out to the side of the mat table or the bed, all right? And then slowly lower the knee. Well, when I lower my knee, what's happening at my hip? I'm extending my hip to a certain degree, right? Not completely, but it's getting to some extension in it. And what I don't want to see is I don't want to see this leg go kicking out, okay? So this foot needs to come right down on that step. So the step gives it a bit of a target, okay? It keeps you honest, really. Otherwise you might think, well, it wasn't too bad. But if you're aiming for something, then you know you're there when you're there, right? So I'd be laying back. I would lift this knee up towards my nose. Take the whole leg out. I wouldn't be doing any rotating. Bring the leg up, take the whole leg out, lower the leg down slowly, and while I do that, I keep my knee bent, all right? So my foot comes in contact with the step, all right? So that's breaking up that pattern. I'm not going to get knee extension with hip extension. I'm going to work on hip extension and knee flexion, keeping it in flexion. The nice thing about this exercise is I'm not really having to go through full extension, which might kick in that knee, all right? And all I have to do is hold my knee in this place. I don't have to move it. I just have to hold it there, all right? So I'm making it a little bit easier on somebody if all they have to do is maintain a position, all right? Maintain the knee flexion, allowing the hip to start to extend, okay? Another one which you probably are more aware of I'm guessing you probably did this in your stroke rehab, is bridging, okay? So we know that bridging, is laying on your back. Again, I'm not on a very steady bench here, so I'll be a little careful. But the idea is that I'm going to be lifting up my pelvis, all right? And as I do that, it's going to stay level. It's not going to be whoppered like over to the side, all right? I have to have equal strength in both hips to get it up, okay? When I can do that, and I'm not getting a turned pelvis, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my stroke foot, and I might need help. I would get it over on top of the knee of the good leg, okay? I would repeat the bridging, but I also want to keep a level pelvis. So again, with my stroke foot on top of my good knee, I'm going to do another bridge, and I'm going to really work on keeping this pelvis level. And I would go up higher, but I'm not on a very steady bench, okay? The hardest one is keeping the stroke leg down and putting your good foot on top. This will be the hardest. And when you start off, you probably won't get your bottom up that far, all right? But look at this. Even when we're doing two legs together, what's happening at the hip? The hip is extending, right? It really is. It's extending, but I'm maintaining my knee in this bent position. I'm not doing this and then the knee goes kicking out, okay? And it might, and you might need somebody to kind of just hold it to the bed or to the floor or wherever you're doing this, all right? And then work on bringing the hip up without the foot kicking out, all right? You want to maintain the knee in the bent position. You don't have to move it into a bent position. You're maintaining it while you're working on isolated hip extension. Isolated, just working on one joint. Working on one joint in movement, and the other joint is staying still, all right? So you've got laying on your, or sitting on the bench, bringing the leg over, keeping the knee inflection down. You've got bridging, where you're keeping the knees bent while you're extending the hips, okay? And again, you might have done all that before, but make sure that the quality of your movement is good, all right? It's no good just doing an exercise and saying, okay, I did a bridge, but maybe it wasn't very level, and maybe my foot shot out a little bit. Well, then that's something we have to work on. It's called inhibition. We inhibit the unwanted movement while we're working on actively moving one joint, okay? So that's two. And another one that's just, again, these are kind of the basic ones, but they're really good because sometimes we jump over these too fast and we didn't really get the good quality. We just kind of got through the exercise, but there's purpose behind these things, okay? The other one that I like to use with people, and I might actually have somebody holding my foot, all right, if I was the person working on this, and I would be wanting that person's hand underneath this foot, but not right underneath the whole foot, okay? Certainly not on the ball of the foot. If you put pressure on the ball of the foot, you know what happens when you have a lot of spasticity? It wants to push down, okay? So just kind of in the middle a little bit and on the side, I'd have somebody holding that foot. But anyway, the idea of this exercise is to be able to, and again, I'd be laying down, not on a very sturdy bench, so I'm going to be careful. I would work on bringing this leg up. All right, so I'm working on hip flexion now with a knee flexion, like a 90-90, all right? And then I would slowly extend the hip. I'm just going to slowly lower the leg, and while I do that, I want slow movement at the knee. I don't want this to shoot out before my leg is ready to be back down on the surface, okay? So again, I bring it up 90-90, and I would want to work on controlled extension of both the knee and the hip without that foot pushing down, okay? Those are 3 exercises. The main thing to think about when we're choosing exercises to improve the control of, say, the hip or maybe the shoulder or whatever joint we're working on, is that we have to keep in mind that synergistic pattern, okay? And we can go over this more in another video, but synergy means that these joints are moving in the same way all the time and as a unit, okay? So you either get the extension or you get the flexion, but there's not a whole lot of in-between control. And those two are not really control either. I had a client once, this was in China, but they're very keen on wanting to measure strength. You know, how strong is this person able to lift their foot off the bed, you know? Well, they asked the person to lift their foot off the bed and the whole leg came up. And the doctor smiled and said, oh, it's a grade 3 or whatever. You know, he can bend it against gravity. I'm thinking, that's not a grade 3, you know? If you don't allow the hip to come up, he's gonna have a hard time extending that knee, you know? So you have to break up those patterns to find out really what the strength is underneath. And that's why I work on doing exercises of control before I ever work on strength. Because I don't want a stronger pattern, I don't want a stronger synergy. I want control over a normal movement, functional pattern, okay? One that's gonna help somebody walk better, gonna help somebody put their shirt on better, those kinds of things. So I look at each joint separately. But these are 3 exercises for the hip. Again, they're not in weight bearing, but they are in a place where on a bed, you should be able to see, and somebody with you should be able to see if you're maintaining the things we talked about. So go ahead and review this. Write down any questions you have. I'm happy to continue this topic. I know it's an important one. And maybe I'll do one just on the whole synergy patterns. You probably have heard about those in the past, but I like to kind of talk about those too. So that's it for right now. I hope you all have a very good afternoon. Feel free to put any questions below, and we will talk later. All right, see you later.